Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Element and Architecture podcast. And today, in this episode, we are diving into the revolutionary spirit and philosophy of perhaps one of the most infamous architects of the 20th century, whose name you've probably heard of if you're ever interested or remotely concerned with architecture. That is Le Corbusier, commonly referred to as the villain of the architecture world. Now, Le Corbusier is known for his highly controversial avant-garde design ideologies, and was certainly groundbreaking at the time, as it is seen as a rejection of previous architectural trends and the initiation of one accompanied by the coming of the machine age at the beginning of the 20th century, basically. Now, despite all the controversies and criticisms that Le Corbusier received in his works, there's no doubt that he redefined the way we think about modern living and urban planning as well in the world of machines. The focus of architecture in today's episode of Element in Architecture podcast is the iconic Villa Savoye, which is a masterpiece that serves as a paragon of Le Corbusier's 5 points of architecture, which we'll go on to discuss later on in this podcast, and his vision of the house as a machine for living. The villa is first completed in 1931 in the French countryside of Poissy, and stands as a testament to Le Corbusier's innovative approach to structure, function, and materiality in his highly mechanized architectural design. So the discussion in this podcast will be dedicated to Villa Savoye's various design elements that combines Le Corbusier's philosophies on function and the aggregation of function and aesthetics from the perspective of the architecture's structure and its aesthetics. Now, this episode is going to be a little bit different because I will be focusing on Villa Savoye as the main architecture that is introduced in this podcast episode. The overarching theme of this episode instead is going to be Le Corbusier's design ideologies. So we're basically going to be shifting the focus onto Le Corbusier as an architect. So we're going to be focusing on the overarching theme of his design ideologies and his sort of spirit as an architect, as a revolutionary architect at the time. Now, this separation is made because I think that his ideologies, Le Corbusier's ideologies, are really interesting and really just unlike any other ideologies we've seen in this podcast series before. So let's get right into it. So Le Corbusier's life started with his career designing houses in arts and crafts style, which was pretty common at that time, until his architectural ideologies are massively impacted. He was sent by his tutor, or his teacher, a Platinier, to visit different parts of Europe, which includes Vienna, Paris, different parts of Greece, Turkey, Italy, and different parts of Europe. And he is very much influenced Le Corbusier is very much influenced by French architects like Garnier. Now, Le Corbusier took off his architecture career when he made a critical visit to Emmaus Charity in Tuscany region in France. And there he first experienced, according to him, the almost living commune life. And this living commune life that is very much socially connected later became a social entity model for his sort of reinterpretation of the utopian socialist ideas. And these ideas were partially influenced by his tutor, his teacher, the Platinier, and partially by French architect Garnier, and forms his primary philosophy for developing architecture in the future. And this encompasses works such as the Villa Radius. However, the pivotal transition point in his architecture career happened when he was massively impacted by the use of concrete, which laid great foundation for his later works, including Villa Savoye. Now, starting in 1908, Le Corbusier began working for Augustus Perret, who is at the time already known for his pioneered use of concrete in not only architecture but furniture, where Le Corbusier was deeply convinced that béton armé, or the reinforced concrete, is the material of the future because of its malleability, solidity, durability, and highly economic qualities. Now, in Paris, Le Corbusier is also profoundly influenced by a new artistic movement that he cooperated in forming with artist Amedeo Modigliani. Now, together, Le Corbusier and Amedeo Modigliani formed the idea of the machine aesthetic under the art movement of Purism, which is accompanied by the arrival of the machine age with the turn of the 20th century. Now, this idea became the essence of Le Corbusier's architectural philosophy that he came to develop later on, describing it as a duality of ideologies. On one hand, the idea of functionalism, the function of the architecture must be achieved. On the other hand, the emphasis on abstract elements that must be contained within the architecture as alongside the function. This duality ultimately was proposed by Le Corbusier under the name of engineering aesthetics. And from here on, we can see Le Corbusier's gravitation towards what he will later on refer to as machine architecture or machine aesthetics, which is a type of aesthetic that is highly mechanized under the machine age. Or I view it personally as a type of hyper-functionalism. He would literally treat architecture with the qualities of a machine that assumes innovative qualities and advancements found in the machine age at the time, in pursuit of efficiency. Le Corbusier, specifically speaking, was particularly fascinated by the design of steamships, a widely used technology at the time. Now, these highly mechanized aesthetics that he developed laid foundation for his fully developed architectural philosophy, which is elucidated in his work 5 Points Towards a New Architecture, outlining the key elements or design notions in his uniquely developed architecture that he believes would be the architecture of the future. Those of which these elements include the pilotis, which is the beams that supports the building, the free plan, the free facade, the ribbon windows, and the exposed roof terrace. Now, these 5 elements make up Le Corbusier's central philosophy as an architect, which is defined by his work 5 Points Towards New Architecture. That is highly relevant to our discussion of Villa Savoye. So, with this architectural philosophy established, Le Corbusier went on to design his most influential work, that is, the Villa Savoye. We will see in the major design elements of Villa Savoye that it is almost a perfect embodiment of Le Corbusier's design principles outlined in his 5 Points Towards New Architecture. Now, the Villa Savoye, along with the other suburban architecture that Le Corbusier built, served as experimentations of the idea contained within Le Corbusier's 5 Points for New Architecture. Now, the villa consists of a major prismatic volume at the top that is elevated by a series of beams at ground level, an emphasis on exposed structure as an aesthetic, and an embodiment of pilotis that Le Corbusier proposed. Now, the ground floor plan involves an elongated semicircle, which is designed around the idea of the turning radius of an automobile, interestingly, which demonstrates the immense influence the machine age aesthetics and functionalism had on Le Corbusier's design philosophies, which is epitomized in his highly mechanized architectural design philosophy. Now, for the whole of the architecture, that is the main part, the major prism at the top, there is a strip window or a ribbon window running through the facade, which blends with the white walls almost seamlessly. Within this architecture, there is a spatial interplay between the public and private spaces. Now, this is contrary to many residential architecture at the time. The living spaces in Villa Savoye revolves around a communal outdoor terrace that is separated from the living area. Again, we can see the influence of Le Corbusier's fascination with communal architecture, which sets foundation for his socialist model of architecture found in his other works like the Villa Reuse, and which is influenced by his teachings from Garnier. Both the lower level and the upper living quarters embrace an open plan concept that encourages inhabitants to move around within the living quarters. So we can see again the alignment with his ideologies or his emphasis on the open plan outlined in his 5 Points Towards New Architecture. Meanwhile, the streamlined design of the Villa Savoye, with the emphasis on curvature and the use of reinforced concrete, resembles the steamship machine model that fascinated Le Corbusier a lot, that emphasized a streamlined architectural form. Now, the entirety of Villa Savoye is a demonstration of Le Corbusier's 5 Points for Architecture that he has come to develop as his primary architectural philosophy. Now, Le Corbusier's profound influences and innovative vision are perfectly encapsulated in the design of his Villa Savoye, drawing inspiration from his early experiences as an architect, including his teachings with Garnier, Perret, and even with his collaborator Modigliani. Le Corbusier developed a unique architectural philosophy that revolutionized modern design. Villa Savoye stands as a testament to his 5 design principles that he believes is the new architecture, the future architecture of the incoming age of the incoming age. You can call it the incoming age of the machine. As we reflect on Le Corbusier's legacy, it's clear that his contributions have left an unremovable almost mark on the field of architecture, blending functionality with a highly mechanized expression in a way that remains timeless and influential, but is often criticized upon by many modern architects today. Now that is it for this episode. It's definitely a different type of episode for me to do because it's so much talking about Le Corbusier's design philosophies, which obviously should be discussed as much as I did today. And I think I will continue to do this type of podcast where I introduce a large part about the design philosophies that influence the architect. And Villa Savoye is definitely the most influential architecture, one of the most influential architecture in the 20th century. And I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.